Hello and welcome. I've got something a little bit different for you today, partly because I'm coming to you from over on the left-hand side of the screen. Hi, not my usual spot, and secondly because there's going to be no Excel at all in today's video, which is very unusual for me, even in the times that I'm not recording YouTube videos, but especially in the times that I am. So instead, I'm going to be talking to you about the first app that I made, first mobile app, and some things I learned from that, and some things that you might learn from that or not. Now, I will say, the stuff that I mostly do videos on, i.e. problem solving in Excel and financial modeling, I'm at least, somewhat of an expert on, or whatever. I have some credentials, let's say, in the area. I have no particular credentials as an app developer, and I make no claim that what I'm going to show you is the best way to do this. What it is, a spreadsheet kind of guy, me, trying to find his way to build something he needed, which I'll describe in a second, in a way that required as little, new effort or learning as possible, starting from being a spreadsheet guy. So, for example, I know that Python coders can write some pretty nifty web apps, but I didn't want to learn Python just to write this app. So, quick background: my son is in a playgroup, which is a cooperative playgroup, meaning it's run by the parents and the teachers. If you happen to, live in the West Village in New York City and have 2 or 3 or 4-year-old children, then you should definitely send them to the Downing Street playgroup. But that's just background. And he was starting school in September of 2020, which was, not quite at the peak of, but certainly during the COVID lockdown in New York City. And so one of the New York State requirements for the school to reopen was that we have a daily health screening. You've all seen them. Have you had any of these symptoms lately? Have you been in close contact? Have you tested positive? Yada, yada, yada. So we were trying to figure out basically a way to do that that would be, as easy as possible for both the parents and the teachers to use, would allow us to keep records because we were required to do that, and obviously would be free because, small cooperative playgroups don't have big budgets for software implementations. So, the obvious starting points were, well, we could have everybody do paper forms. It's a little bit slow. It kind of creates a bottleneck if, 10 kids are being dropped off at the same time. And, because of the record maintaining requirement, it could get a little messy, but doable. Second option was have everybody fill out a Google form, which would be super easy for the parents, but, if you have everybody dumping data into the same form every day over the course of a school year, you're going to have like thousands of rows of data. So you think about it from the teacher's perspective, they're kind of, opening this up on their phone, scrolling down to row 2400, scanning to see whose names are there, in their head, trying to figure out whose names are missing, reading across to see what answers have been given if they're supposed to let the person in. Again, theoretically doable, but quite messy. And so the thought was, well, let's figure out if we can make a mobile app that would allow the parents to easily fill in the questionnaire and the teachers to easily see, who's supposed to be here today, and of those, who has answered the questionnaire in a way that means they can come in, who answered the questionnaire but can't come in, and who hasn't answered the questionnaire yet. And so, I did a bit of Googling, and given the constraints, i.e., I wanted it to be relatively easy for me to learn as a person who knows Excel, but not a bunch of other programming languages, had to be free, and had to, do the other things I've talked about. Amazon Honeycode was the thing that I found. Again, no idea. Maybe there are better things out there. I couldn't find one at the time, but that's what I went with. So I'm going to show you now what I made and tell you a little bit about that experience. So the idea with Honeycode is you've got a bunch of tables, which will be familiar to the Excel user. So here's my list of students and the dates, and then the answers provided by those students on those dates to the various different questions. I've got another table which I won't show you because that one I wasn't able to sanitize, but that one kind of links each parent to their kid, their student, and then there's a table slightly weirdly for answers that just contains Y and N because that was the only way to have a yes/no question, which seemed kind of clunky, but fine, it is what it is. And then you've got apps that let users interact with pieces of that data. So let's just go back for a second to the main table here. And we'll say, okay, so, if I am I think I'm set up right now as the parent of child 7 after I anonymized it, and today is the 23rd of March. So then I should be able to interact with this row when I'm checking in. And if I'm one of the teachers, I want to be able to interact with all of these rows here that are related to today. So I can see, who's here, who's checked in, etc. So the apps are, they're basically very straightforward to build. It's kind of, drag and drop and place things within things, and what you see is what you get and whatever. So, there's a box up the top that just says questionnaire in it. Then there's, something that has child's name and the date and the questions, which are all just kind of typed in. But then the interesting thing is that you can link pieces of these to either a formula. So like here, the data here is just a formula today, so it'll show today's date. Or you can link it to, let me see, I think the link is up here on the block. You can link it to a row in the table. So here this is saying find the row in the parents table where the parent is the current app user. And then, so that whole block is then linked to that row. And then once I go to this data cell down here, the formula in there is just student, which means it's just giving the value in the student column in the table row, which is, the row in the parents table related to that student that day. And then similarly, you can do one link in this whole block here, which is, find the row in the main table where the student is the student associated with the parent that's the current app user. It's a little bit of a mess to write the formula, but not conceptually complicated, and where the date is today's date. And then once you've done that, each of these questions can just be linked to one column. So, are you, so we've got kind of all the standard, have you had any of these symptoms? Have you been in close contact? And there's another one asking, are you parent of the day? Because, parents take turns being in the classroom for a day. And so if you're parent of the day, then, then this piece becomes visible. So if you say POD is yes, then the visibility of this becomes true. And then it says, answer the remaining questions for both your child and yourself. So basically each box has, associated data. So in this case, that's, it's linked to the parent of the day column. It has display settings. So let's say this whole chunk, for example, formula is a little complicated, but it basically says display unless the kid is checked in or no match, meaning not due to be in school today. And then there's other things down below that show instead. And then there's actions. I'll come back to that later when I show you some actions. So yeah, basically that lets you fill everything in. So let's just flip over to, I will say I'm kind of showing these just because I'm on a computer to demonstrate. I'm showing these in a sort of squished up window to try to vaguely simulate having it on the phone. I will say, on the app on the phone, it actually does look a lot cleaner than this kind of slightly messy looking thing here. But anyway, so, will you be in class as parent of the day? Let's say I won't. Have you had any symptoms? Let's say I haven't, etc. And then if I come back to this table, like I said, I'm linked to child 7. So in a second or two, we should see. And by the way, I will say, I haven't used this for a while. I'll explain later. We moved on to a different one in September of last year. But my memory is that this was much, much, much closer to real time when I was originally filling it out. I'm not quite sure why it's running so slowly now. Maybe I'm on an old version, or maybe something else has changed. I don't know. But I think it used to work better than this. I imagine if I was, doing it right or starting it now or whatever, then it probably would work. I don't know. That has not updated at all, which is a little not good. Let's see if we can convince it to. Just refresh the table, at least see if it is. Okay, good. So it is working. I don't know why it's not working live, but like I said, back in the day when I was using it more regularly, it was working live. But that's not important. So that does that, and then yeah, then there's other things down here. So if your screening failed and this box pops up saying, based on your answers, you should bring your child to school today. If your form is complete and not a fail, then you get this thing saying, hey, you're all done. Thank you. If your child is checked in, which I'll show you on the teacher's app in a minute, then you get this message. So all the questions go away, and you get this message saying you're all checked in. And then if there's no row for your child for that day, you get this message saying you're not due to be in school today, so you don't need to, because we have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday group and a Tuesday, Thursday group, so not everyone's in every day. So the idea is if you open this app on a day your kid's not in school, you get that. And if that's a mistake, or I haven't updated the data in the back end or something, then you hit the submit anyway button, and so there's a good chance to show you the actions, then this creates a new row in the main table. We take the student associated with the current app user and write that into the student column, and we take today's date and write it into the date column, and then you've got a new column, a new row in the table, and then the rest of the app will then refresh to say, okay, well, it's no longer the case that there's no match, so that this piece will become invisible, and then this big block up here with all the questions will become visible. So that's just the kind of action you can take. So then take a quick flip over to the teacher's check-in app. Basically what you've got here is a list of all the students, and that's just set up as a list, so it's linked to, rather than finding one row, it's filtering on the main table where the date is today, and you're sorting by status and then by student name. And then, for each, so, this is saying it's finding 12. For each one of them, it's going to show the child's name, the status, and a check-in button. And then each of these is visible only in certain situations. So in other words, the grayed out one is only visible when you're checked in, the yellow one is when you're incomplete, the red one is when you failed screening, and the white background is when screening is complete, and the check-in button is when screening is complete. So what does that look like? Let's go over here. Here's what that looks like. So you see, okay, here's 2 kids who have failed screening. Here's, a few kids who have screening complete, ready to be checked in. And here's a bunch of people who are incomplete, and a couple at the bottom who are already checked in. So let's say, I check in child 3. So now you'll see they pop down there. And if I go back to the data and look at child 3, it'll show me, okay, yeah, Dearmid early checked this person in. I don't know what time zone this is in. I used to think it was West Coast, but it seems to be slightly further away from me than West Coast normally would be. But anyway, so it's got a weird time zone, but it says, what app user checked this person in at what time. So then let's see if I come back over here. Like I said, it doesn't seem to be updating as quickly as it did when we were using this regularly, but let's just see if I can turn child 7, who's the child I'm linked to, into a screening fail. Let's see if it updates in the original data first. So over here, child 7, oops, sorry, I'll scroll down one more row so you can see child 7. So now I've got yes to symptoms there, so hopefully when I come back over here, yes, so child 7 is now a screening fail. And then if I come back over here and instead say no to that and no to all the other stuff, sorry, let's just put in one yes for a second so you can see now, okay, this bit is saying don't bring your kid to school. Now say no, that bit's gone away. I say no again, and now it says your form is complete. And then in a second, or a few seconds, like I said, I don't know why it's taking a little longer at the moment, but now they pop up over here, and I can say check in, and then I'll just kind of quickly show you on the actions on that button. Actions over here. What is that doing? That writes the current time and date now, into check-in time, and it writes the current app user into checked in by. So if I pop back over here and I say check in for child 7, then I'll see over here checked in by Dearmid early at this time. And then if I come back over here to my screening app, now I see your child has been checked in for today. Thank you. So that's the app that I built. A little bit about some of the fun and challenges that came with it. So obviously there was a little bit of a learning curve, but I have to say not a huge amount. I think I was trying to do something that felt a little bit different to some of the base examples they offer. So I did have to do a certain amount of coding, which I think, if you're using something that's more like their off-the-shelf apps, you could probably get away with that completely. But I had some of these slightly more complicated logic, so that took me a while to figure out the syntax of this code. But it's not crazy different if you're familiar with Excel functions, and especially if you're also familiar with M code that you use in Power Query or Power BI, then this is not super weird. Didn't take that much getting used to, and there was reasonable help for it online. So I think all in all, once I had identified Honeycode, it took me, I don't know, maybe 3 hours or something like that to kind of muddle my way through building the app. Second challenge was it does require a login, so there was no way you could just say, send a guest link of this thing so that a new person could add themselves. Everyone had to be like logged in and a member of the team, and that kind of links to the next thing, which is, there was the free version was strictly limited to 20 users, and the cost got quite high after that. So the first paid plan is $20 a month plus $10 per user over 20 users. So if you had like 30 people using it, then you'd be looking at $120 a month versus, free at 20. So we were just about able to keep it within 20 people using it last year because our enrollment was a little low during COVID. But that was kind of a deal breaker for this year because, in a normal time between the two different classes and the teachers who need to use the app as well, there's like 30 different people there. So, obviously we weren't willing to pay that much. A couple of other smaller things. One, it was hard to add someone to the team or to add someone to the app. So for some reason, there was like a two-step process, which is, first you have to add someone to your Honeycode team. So you'd send them an invite, and the only invite you could send was a 24-hour timed exploding invite. So if they didn't click on the link promptly, then, they'd miss it and you'd have to do it again. And, when you're dealing with parents of young kids who have a lot going on, and especially during COVID times had a lot going on and a lot of other things on their mind, that was a painful thing, just the fact that it exploded in 24 hours. But then also, once they're added to the team, they don't automatically get added to the app, and you can't pre-add them to the app. So it had to be a two-step process. I would say, click on this link, has to be in the next 24 hours. And then I'd get a notification that they had clicked on the link, and then I'd go in and add them to the app and associate them with a student and so on. But so that, the setup was a little kind of clunky and painful. I will emphasize, this thing was fairly new when I was using it, and I would imagine that it has evolved quite a bit since. So, any of these critiques may be somewhat out of date. The other thing, we had a bit of a bug with it. You can see that I've linked a lot of things to today's date, and it's kind of the challenge of like a volatile function in Excel, that it wasn't, because the formula wasn't changing as a new day ticked over, it didn't seem to be triggering a recalculation in the way that it should. So we'd often have a situation where, it was still showing yesterday's data until somebody prompted it. So, if a student went to log in and got this message, you're not supposed to be in school today, and hit submit anyway, or if a parent did, I should say, then that would kind of, that addition of a new row would prompt it and it would refresh, and then it would start showing the right data. But if one of our teachers who had been in the previous day went in, they would get this message saying, you've been checked in for the day, thank you. And the only way that I could find to change that was basically for me to go into the back end and like poke it. Like if I inserted a column in a table or something like that, that would prompt it to recalculate. But there wasn't any way to interact with the back end from a phone, because it's only designed to let you use the apps from a phone, but not the back end. And so that was a bit of a pain for me. But again, nothing we couldn't live with. But yeah, like I said, we got to last September, facing into a new school year with considerably more than 20 people to use it. And by the way, just as a kind of general thing, it's any user, meaning anyone who even, fills in data in an app, costs the same as someone who designs and builds and ships lots and lots of apps, which is a weird pricing model in my opinion. That was one thing I did look to see. It's been 18 months since I used it. Have they updated that? It looks like they haven't, so that's kind of weird to me. But anyway, so I had to move off Honeycode. So the question was, what can we use instead? Did a little bit of poking around. I couldn't find anything that would give us a big enough group of users for free. If you're aware of something that would, then go back in time 6 months and tell me. Or second best option, tell me now, because then at least I'll learn something for the future. But given all the constraints that we've talked about, we decided that our best bet was a modified version of the Google Forms approach that we talked about earlier. So basically trying to put a nicer front end on that. So let me just show you. So the original draft was something like this. Again, I've kind of sanitized the names, but you would select your name, and then you'd answer all the different questions, and that would go into a big sheet of answers, and then we'd basically have a way of pulling that into one place for the teachers to see. So that screener looked something like this. So you'd have, here's screening results, today's date, Again, this is not obviously the aspect ratio of a mobile phone screen, so this looks a lot better on mobile. Maybe I can even show you what it looks like on my mobile. So you can see on my phone, it all kind of fits neatly in one screen. So this shows you the results kind of gathered up in a usable way. So how does that work? Well, basically the results come in here. So you've got sort of your answers to each of the different questions. First thing we need to do is just compile that into one single result. So here's some of my test data up here, which is either these responses are incomplete, this is a fail, this is a pass, or this is a pass and this person is parent of the day, because then we don't actually have one of those in here, but never mind, because then that gets highlighted. So yeah, first of all, how do we do that? Well, it's a little tricky to do that with a Google form, dumping data into a Google Sheet, because the default behavior seems to be some kind of like insert row in here. So if I put a formula in here that says, if these are all no, then pass, if some of them are blank, etc., 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 then I can kind of copy the formula down to all the visible rows, but then it comes and inserts a new row, and this is empty, so that doesn't work. But what you can do is you can, if you know how to write an array formula, then you can write an array formula here that refers to the entirety of each column, and that way, that basically means that the array formula dumps out results into the entire column, and that means that even when you insert a row, it's still there. So that is a formula that doesn't have an exact parallel in Excel, but it's in the spirit of dynamic arrays. And so what is this saying? Well, I'm saying if the first column is the word timestamp, i.e. you're in the header row, then give me result up here. Otherwise, if the timestamp is blank, then give me nothing. So that's why down here it's not showing anything. And then this is kind of trying to do an AND, except you can't do an AND in an array formula, either in Excel or in Sheets. So this is saying, if any of them is blank, so there's 4 minus 4 different things. So if all of these evaluate to true, i.e. all of them are non-blank, then you get 4 minus 1, 2, 3, 4, which is 0. So that evaluates to false, and it goes into the second piece. If any of them is blank, then it evaluates to, this comes out to a positive number, and that is true. So you go to the first argument, which is incomplete. If they're all non-blank, then you come in here and you say, if each of the answers is the good answer, sorry, if any of the answers is not the good answer, then fail, otherwise pass, and if your answer to the parent of the day question is yes, then add parent of the day at the end. And so that fills out this column of pass, and parent of the day, fail, incomplete, etc., which then gets pulled in here. So yeah, like I said, originally, my plan was you'd kind of select your name here and then you'd answer each of the questions. And then at some point we realized, for the total setup cost, it was actually worth, just making one of these for each family and a separate one for guests. So, this is the guest one. They type in their name. But then for everybody else, this would just say, for your kid's name, and then you only have to answer yes or no questions, which makes it a little bit faster to complete. And so then how does it work? Well, we've just got a static list of the kids in each class here. So this is the Tuesday, Thursday class, this is the Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, and then for each one of those, I've got a thing looking into that particular kid's results sheet. So in other words, I won't click on this because again, all the sheet names are the kids' names. So I'm keeping this anonymous. But there's a hidden sheet here like this one that's a Google form output for each of the kids. And so this is one I've just sanitized, renamed name. So what are we saying? Well, column A is the timestamp. So I'm saying take the max of the timestamp, i.e. the most recent submission, and take the int of that. So in other words, Sheets, just like Excel, treats dates and times like the date is a whole number, the number of days since whatever, January 1st, 1904, or something like that. And then the time is a fraction of the day. So, noon is 0.5, 6 a.m. is 0.25, and so on. So the int of a timestamp, date and time, is the date. So if that is equal to cell B3, which is today, live linked, then index on column F, which is the column with the results, and the row number is match the highest timestamp against the timestamp, or you could equally make this, count A. Sorry, no, I remember I thought about making it count A, but then depending on how you treat it, sometimes forms can leave a blank row. So actually you don't want to do count A because you might have a blank row and then it points to the wrong place. But anyway, so if the most recent one is not today, then you just say not done. And if the most recent one is today, then you take the data from there. So let me just quickly show you. If I open up my form, and let's just say I go through and I say note everything except yes for one of them, and then I'll just show you. Hopefully you'll see this one reacts a little bit faster than the other one. So I'm going to hit submit. Where's the camera? There it is. Submit, and boom, it immediately turns red for a fail. And then I can say, okay, whoops, submit another response. I made a mistake. So, the downside with the form solution is you can't edit it, but if you set the formulas up like here to only take the most recent answers, then, if you make a mistake, whoops, you just go back through again, hit submit, and just like that, real time, it updates to a pass. Then the other interesting, or semi-interesting thing, at least from a formula perspective, is we've got this separate guest thing where people can enter a name, and same thing, it comes to a pass or a fail. There's a neat little Google Sheets formula called query that can very nicely pull just the relevant pieces of that. This isn't by any means the most powerful use case for query, because this one you could also do with filter, but query is really one of my favorite things about Google Sheets. One of the few edges it still has over Excel, which is you can write much more complicated queries than this. So this is saying, select column B, which is the name, and column F, which is the status. That's, these two columns here, from, guests. Also, sorry, just small aside, the way that you can reference ranges like this with no bottom row, just to say A2 to F, meaning, from row 2 down to the bottom, wherever that is. Obviously, it's more necessary in Google Sheets because the size of a sheet is variable, but the fact that you can write, a reference in that much more compact way rather than, the Excel equivalent, which would be writing whatever 1048, I don't even remember the number, whatever it is, I like that. So again, there aren't that many things that Sheets still has over Excel, especially with, the sort of surge of recent developments, but that's a nice thing, and the query function is a nice thing. So anyway, I'm selecting column B and column F, where A, which is the timestamp, is greater than or equal. I've set this as a hard code of just the day that I put in the testing data, because again, I don't want to show you the real data because that has real people's names in it that are none of your business. So I've just hard coded this here, but the real version of this links, rather than just having date text here, it like textifies this cell up here. And so, where the timestamp is greater than or equal to today's date and less than tomorrow's date. So in other words, any time between 1 second past midnight on this day and, or sorry, actually midnight at the start of this day and 1 second to midnight at the end of that day. But this query can also aggregate. So for example, if I had some numerical data in here, I could ask it, how many times has each of these names submitted a form? So I could see, this person has submitted it 8 different times or something like that. And you can also sort by that, which, there are workarounds, but that's one thing that there's no, as far as I know, no neat one-step way to do in Excel. You can say, give me a unique list, and then you can say, count how many times, or sum how many times, or aggregate whatever way you want. And then you can make a new range that dynamically sorts that. But to go straight from your source data to something that's grouped and sorted is somewhat simple with query. You've got to learn the syntax of query, which is not trivial. But like I said, there's no super easy way to do that in Excel. So just in case you think I'm a one-trick Excel pony, I'm actually like a 1.25 trick pony because I can do sheets as well, which certainly doesn't qualify as a whole separate trick, but it's not nothing. Anyway, I think that's all I've got for today. Closing thought is to say, as I mentioned at the start, this was very much kind of me muddling through because I needed to get to a particular place. This is not something I'm an expert on, so there's hopefully not, but there's some chance that my son won't be there anymore next year, but there's some chance that the people who are still running the playgroup next year are going to need this again. Really hope not, because I want to be done with COVID. But if you know of an easier way to do this, or a smarter way to do this, or a platform that lets you do this for free for 30 users, I'd love to hear about it. Or just more generally, because like I said, I know less about this than I usually do about what I'm presenting. So if you can educate me, I'd love to hear about it. And that, I think, is all I have for today. Thanks for watching.